What is going on, guys? Meteorologist Jonathan Kagas with you for another edition of Tropics Watch Live. Hey, down to the final two, unless something happens in December, which it could, and we're going to get all into that in just 1 second. There's nothing concrete happening in December. I'll just show you why we're going to be more likely, anyway, than on a typical post-season or early season next year to see tropical development. It's all because of the water temperature. Hint, hint, it is still blazing in the central Atlantic. There are those two little areas of interest there in yellow, one in the Caribbean, one in the north centrally Atlantic. We're going to get into those in just 1 second. Before we get into this live stream, that will also include us looking back. There was a lot of chatter on social media that the National Hurricane Center missed a hurricane in South Florida this past weekend. They did not. It was not tropical in nature. We're going to go over all of that as well. So if you were wondering why, even though South Florida got battered by that thing that brought Central and North Florida a lot of heavy rain, it was not a tropical cyclone. It was not a tropical system, not a tropical storm, certainly not a hurricane. But we're going to look all into that and break it down meteorologically and scientifically. So if you're interested in that, stick around towards the end of this live stream, which we are live on the News 6 YouTube channel. If you are watching on that, post in the comments. I'll answer any questions or comments right in the live feed here. We'll bring those comments over. You'll see yourself right on the screen, and we're going to break all that down. Also, of course, on clickorlando.com, News 6 Plus, the News 6 Hurricane app. Best tool, by the way, if you haven't downloaded that. It is a great tool to stay up to date with the tropics. If you are a weather nerd like me, great tool for it. And, of course, the Pinpoint or the News 6 News app. There's so many places to see this and to get your weather information, and we hope you do that with News 6 and clickorlando.com. All right, without further ado, we are going to get into this. Two areas to highlight. The thing in the Caribbean we talked about last week, thankfully, never developed, but did bring that heavy rain to the Caribbean as expected. Dominican Republic, parts of Jamaica. We still see what's left of a front right here, and now our system is kind of like up here, all kind of sheared apart. But still some thunderstorm activity in the Caribbean, and that little flare-up is what the Hurricane Center is highlighting here. There's a lot of dry air in the Caribbean right now, especially on the western side of the Caribbean. So it's going to be hard for this thing to develop, especially any kind of significant development, even though the water temperatures are still jet fuel in this region. Significant development as it moves towards Central America is unlikely. With that said, we're going to have another round of heavy rain coming to parts of Nicaragua, Honduras, Panama, Costa Rica, over the next couple of days, really towards the end of this week. So again, just keep that in mind for our friends in Central America. What we are going to be watching for, I think, what's going to have a better opportunity for development along that front that I just drew there, we are going to have an area of low pressure developing. You can already kind of see the curl here, that spin, if you will, right in through here. It's going to be that area that is going to develop into a non-tropical area of low pressure first. Now, what happens with these fronts is they get over warm water, they have to undergo some kind of transition meteorologically to a subtropical or tropical system. That is why there's this yellow blob here is drawn by the National Hurricane Center, because in that region, that is where it could take on some subtropical or maybe even morph into a completely tropical system. This should not impact too many people. Now, for our friends in the Azores, we're going to watch that for you over the next 7 to 10 days, closer towards that 7 to 10 day time frame. That's when it could kind of loop around and come toward you guys. But this is going to be the area, and stick around for a couple of more minutes. I'm going to show you the model forecast next, and then we're going to talk about why this is really going to be the range that we're going to watch for any kind of potential late season, well, we are late season, potential post-season, and then early season for next year development. So here we go. We're watching the circles. Here's our front kind of all strung out here. We're going to watch the circles. This is going to be on November 20th. That small circle there is that little weak thing in the Caribbean. Again, models have it. They're showing it there, but very little to no development with that one. Still bringing heavy rain to parts of Central America. You saw, let me back this up because I think that was a very good representation here of what's going to happen. So keep a close eye on this part of the front right there. You see how it kind of goes from a strung out string bean looking thing to now we have that little circle. So that's kind of that transition that it's undergoing, and then you see the spin here. So at this point, we may have a subtropical storm kind of merging into or morphing into a tropical storm. Here are our friends in the Azores, so we're going to be watching that thing right there for you. Again, look at the date there. That's November 28th. So this is 8 to 10 days into the future, 7 to 10 days into the future. So we're going to be watching that as there. The European, very, very similar. Here's our little red circle. That's that low-level spin, or meteorologically vorticity, as we call it. And you see it kind of spiraling there as it goes towards Central America. Again, little to no development with that one. We're not expecting anything significant in terms of development. Still some very heavy rain potential for landslides, again, in Central America. Now, European, a little bit more aggressive here. You see that little red circle there? That is our thing. It would argue for a tropical system as it moves towards the Azores on November 26th. So it's a little faster with its development than the GFS. So now we're looking at as early as 6 days of a tropical system near the Azores. Regardless, the Atlantic is pretty conducive. And this is the one thing, we talked about this before we got into the season. Some people call it the Atlantic Nino here because it kind of looks like El Nino, at least the sea surface temperature anomaly pattern, as it does off of the coast of South America as what it does off the coast of Africa. So it has been really, really warm in this area north of the main development region. And if we are going to get these post-season storms and late-season storms, it's going to be in this area, just like what we're kind of watching over the next few days. Cold front comes off the United States. We get a system to develop right in here, and then note the anomalies. Again, these are the anomalies. So we're seeing the darker red here. This is where we're 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above normal. So way, way above normal for this time of the year. Remember, it's November, and not just November. It is November 20th, and we still have water temperatures in that area. This is about the area of development in the mid to upper 80s. Even toward the North Atlantic, we have, and into the Azores, we have water temperatures in the middle 70s. So it's crazy, crazy warm for this time of the year in this region. So when you get these cold fronts that move off and kind of fizzle out, that's kind of the catalyst. We don't have the West African monsoon season anymore, so we don't have those waves rolling off of Africa that we do towards the peak season down in the main development region. Central American gyre is really shutting down as well, so we don't have that forcing mechanism sliding through. So now what we look for is these big mid-latitude cyclones, these non-tropical systems, to act as the kind of focal point for a transition into a tropical system. So we're gonna watch that over the next really couple of weeks, even into December. So I would not be surprised if we have, I think anyway, we have a higher than normal shot for postseason development, which would be through December, and then early season development, the January, February, March, especially the January, February timeframe, when we're not really accustomed to seeing those, but with how crazy warm the water is still, it heightens our chance of one of these bigger storms rolling off of the United States and then kind of transitioning into a tropical system. If we do get this next little thing named off that cold front, the next one would be Vince. Vince has been trying to be a thing for the last few weeks. We had 2 of those systems in the Caribbean, thankfully not coming to fruition. And we have this other thing now. So we'll see if we get Vince. Remember, only 2 names left. If we do exhaust all of these names, then we are going to get into that supplemental list. Let's hope we don't see it. But for all intents and purposes, the hurricane season in the United States is pretty much over. And if something would come in this direction, it's likely going to be sloppy. It's likely going to be weak. So basically 0, knock on wood, is the opportunity for a significant storm in the United States, unless you would get something to stall out and have a flooding issue. But man, really, at this stage in the game, the season is, for all intents and purposes, are over for the United States. The Caribbean we still have to watch, and then, of course, the islands in the North Atlantic we're going to have to watch. Okay, if you have stuck around for the Florida portion, the South Florida portion of the unnamed storm of 2023, we're going to break this down now. I mentioned this earlier in the live stream that there were so many people just pitchfork, torches, all that stuff for the Hurricane Center because they missed this, because they did not name this storm. They shouldn't have named this storm. This was not a tropical storm. This was not a hurricane. For my friends that may be watching from the Northeast, or for anyone that's lived in the Northeast and now live in Florida, you've seen the nor'easters before. you know how much damage that they can cause. A nor'easter is a non-tropical low, scientifically mid-latitude cyclone. If you want to get more meteorologically into that, it is called a baroclinic low. And what a baroclinic system does is gets its strength from differences in temperature and pressure in the atmosphere. It has fronts attached to it. This had fronts attached to it. We're going to break down this radar image in a second. I'm just kind of BSing as we get into this. Just kind of show you talk about the difference first. A tropical system gets all of its strength from the warmer waters of the Atlantic. That's not what's happening here. If we go back and look at this radar image, this is, of course, this is not current, I should say. This is back on Wednesday the 15th into Thursday the 16th of November, where we had that massive storm roll through the upper Keys, extreme South Florida, and then towards Miami. And you see here, we had this little donut hole. Again, on radar, there we go, right about here. It was early in the morning, right about there. It almost has an eye-like feature. That's what we call a mesoscale convective vortex, or MCV for short. So what we have going on here, we have a lot of latent heat being released into the atmosphere here from the condensation of water. And what happens is we also had a lot of, if you were watching the radar that night, this is not the high-resolution data that we had on Wednesday and Thursday, but there were also a lot of low-top supercells here. And what happened, they kind of all merged together, released a lot of latent heat, and we got that big MCV, mesoscale convective vortex, that caused a lot of damage. These things do a lot of times in the plains. When we get these mesoscale convective complexes, these massive lines of thunderstorms that roll on through, a lot of times they develop these things and then do a lot of damage. That's what was going on. So no, South Florida, while the damage looked like it and while it felt like it, and certainly the radar would look like it, that was not a tropical cyclone. So before you take to Twitter and be like, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck and whatever it does like a duck, it may look like that, but you got to know the meteorology behind it. And that is why the National Hurricane Center did not name this. Now, they did have this as a blob, that yellow highlight off the coast. That is the wrong thing. They did have this area highlighted for possible tropical development. That was because this little spiral here, sometimes MCVs, those mesoscale convective complexes, as they are vortex, I should say, gets out over the warm waters for an extended period of time and then acts as a focal point for tropical development. This obviously was not sustained. It was still gnarly through the Bahamas. It caused a lot of damage to the Bahamas as well, but it never was able to fully become a tropical system, and therefore, again, never became a tropical depression. It was a non-tropical system, again, very similar to what you would see in the mid-Atlantic, in the Northeast, with those big nor'easters that roll up the coast. In the wintertime, they pummel them with snow, and they are driven by the differences in temperature and pressure in the atmosphere, rather than a barotropic system, which is your tropical cyclone that gets all of its strength, all of its moisture, all of its whatever, from all of its mojo, all of its oomph from the warm waters of the Atlantic. So I hope in some way that cleared that up, because there was a lot of chatter. And again, it's important to know the distinction. The people at the Hurricane Center are the smartest people when it comes to tropical cyclones and tropical forecasting. They didn't miss it. It wasn't tropical in nature, so therefore, that's why it wasn't highlighted. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in as I go on my soapbox there. Appreciate it always. Again, we have one more of these officially next Monday of Tropics Watch Live, and then we'll hop on here if we do get post-season development. I hope you have found these helpful. We'll talk much more about that and much more of what the post-season could bring in the last edition of the 2023 Tropics Watch Live edition. Tropics Watch Live show. Yeah. All that stuff. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for all of your comments. Oh, Chuck has a good one. Okay, so I'm going to do some finagling here, and I'm going to show, first of all, I'm going to show Chuck's comment. Bear with me one second. I have like 45 windows open, or tabs, and accidentally closed the one that I need, so I need to open it back up. But I'll show you everybody, anybody that's still watching here. Chuck asked, what caused all the rain in Daytona and Port Orange over the weekend? So it was this system. It was this system that we are looking at. Let me do I got to change my radar time. Let me go all the way out to 10. I was through 10 o'clock p.m. on the 16th, and I'm going to change the radar view here. So what happened here? There's all the rain in Daytona Beach, okay? I mean, crazy stuff. So the low pressure, there it is right there, down off the coast of Miami. I don't know why the radar loop is lagging, probably because I'm drawing on it. There we go. And then now we have that shield of rain. Basically, this area of low pressure that slid out in this direction, it was like here, moved here. It induced a very strong easterly wind off of the Atlantic. So what had happened was there was also kind of a stalled out front, like right here. We had increasing easterly wind off of the Atlantic supplying the moisture. The front acted as like a trigger mechanism. And then basically we had a ton of forcing to get air to rise, cool, and condense. And then just that steady stream of moisture coming in off the Atlantic. Let me get all my drawings off of here so you can kind of see that loop again going from the main system down here to here, and then that easterly wind generating kind of, I don't want to say banding, they weren't really banding features, but kind of like those training downpours off of the Atlantic right on into the Florida coast as we moved through the day on Thursday, and that's why we had the persistent rain. And that all-day rain, that very ugly, atypical November Florida day. With that said, too, expect more of this. If you had watched the winter forecast that I put out, my own thoughts anyway, back in October or September, one of the 2 months, it's crazy that it's about to be Thanksgiving. We talked about the active storm track, and that favors rain, clouds, and the potential for severe weather as well as we go forward into the winter months. And especially it looks like the back half of the winter, the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic may get blasted with snow. So you may be asking, well, why the heck does that concern me? Well, because a lot of times those storms get birthed right down to the Gulf and then move up the coast. And then we get the trailing cold front of that, which can ignite severe weather because we still have the warm water around to help kind of increase the instability a little bit. So really, if you want to take it back further, we talked about this blob coming out of the North Atlantic. Then we had the developing coastal storm here. That blob kind of transferred its energy. I like to call it's like tag team in wrestling. You need your buddy. You got to, WWE or whatever it was called. Sorry, it was back in the day. Tag team in, it transferred its energy, and then that one got going and then rode up the coast, induced that easterly wind, and then really just pummeled a lot of Central Florida with that heavy rain. That was a lot there, but I hope that answers your question, Chuck. And thanks for tuning in again. I appreciate you, my friend. Yeah, just a wild Thursday. Just so much rain. Ugly week. It was nuts. I was trying to show off Central Florida. My parents were in town. They were helping with some projects. And as soon as they get in, the clouds roll in. And then it kind of drizzled, mist. And then Thursday, of course, was just a washout day. Then it finally got sunny on the day that they had left. So I could not show off Central Florida weather. Anyway. Thank you guys again for tuning in, Chuck. Awesome question. I'm glad you brought that up, the Central Florida perspective of the craziness that happened down in South Florida Wednesday night into Thursday. Appreciate you guys a ton for tuning in. We will catch you on Monday. Again, we are coming at you live on the News 6 YouTube channel. ClickOrlando.com, the News 6 app, and the Pinpoint Hurricane app. I know there's only less than 2 weeks left, but for next year, download the Pinpoint Hurricane app if you don't have it. It's really the best tool on the market, and it's free to stay up with everything hurricane season. We will catch you soon, guys. Thanks a lot.